Hey everybody, this is Keith from Indie Comics Relay, back with another live stream. I'm here with my good co-host and good friend, Johnny C. How's it going, buddy?
What's up, man? It's the first Wednesday of 2021, and we're back with another amazing Indie Comics Relay. Tonight is jam-packed with guests.
We got a ton of people tonight. We're starting 2021 off right,
Yep. And the other thing is that I think this is a first for us. This is the first time we're featuring an anthology. So it's a collection of creators. And I'm proud to say that a lot of the creators in this book I know personally and are also very good friends.
Cool.
Yeah.
And do you know all four of our guests well?
I know maybe 3 out of the 4 guests very well. So
okay.
I'll let the one I don't know, I'll probably do the most questioning on. Get to know them a little bit better.
Awesome. Yeah, since we have 4 guests, we'll get started right away. So let's bring everybody in.
Big shout out to everybody watching right now, by the way.
Thanks for joining us.
Kevin, Roland, thank you for being here.
Yeah, and if you guys are watching us on Twitter or Facebook, please consider jumping on YouTube and subscribing and just helping our channel grow and reach more indie creators and more indie comic fans, so that we can get the word out on how great indie comics are. So without further ado, let's start with we got Buddy Scalera with us tonight. Hey, Buddy. Thanks for joining us.
How are you?
Looking forward to talking to you. All right. Next, we got Erin. Hey, Erin. Thanks for joining us. We got AA or double A. Or is that stand for awesome? Awesome Ari?
It's Ari and my middle name, which is Alexander.
Gotcha.
You could call me AA, you could call me Ari. My dad used to call me Aces as a kid, but that's another thing. So, there you go. So
in fact, Ari is Aces.
Awesome. All right, and finally we got Arielle with us. All right, guys, thanks for joining us tonight on the first episode of Indie Comics Relay for 2021. Great to have you guys here.
Time out to hang out with us and to share your project that you guys just completed. I actually remember Buddy speaking of this maybe I think it was C2E2 a long time ago. You kind of had the initial idea, and I remember sitting around a table with me, all the usual suspects, me, you, Petrovelli, J. Jacob Barker, I think may have been there, and Jeff Ryder. And I'm glad to see that it actually kind of came to fruition.
There's a reason for that, Johnny, and we will unpack the magical reason why this all happened tonight on this show for the first time.
Oh, great. That's awesome. We got an exclusive, Johnny. Can you believe it?
Yeah, I know, right?
Go ahead, Johnny.
Buddy is, I've known Buddy for quite some time. He hosts the Creator Connection panel for New York Comic Con. If it wasn't for Buddy, I wouldn't have met a lot of my, great indie comic friends or collaborators. I do owe a lot to you in that regard, Buddy. I thank you for, again, being on the show and being there for us indie comics guys.
Yeah, awesome. I've never crossed paths with Buddy, but I'm glad we crossed paths tonight. That's awesome.
Generally, Keith, you have to be in a place of ill repute in order to cross paths with me, which is why Johnny and I have spent a lot of time together.
Yeah, that makes sense. That explains it.
Yeah. Many hours at the Twins pub.
Yeah, right. Awesome. So the one thing we always start with off on the show with our guests is we love to find out the origin of people. What was it that that first comic or that first movie or TV show that really inspired you to want to get into this field? You once you read it, you're like, I have to be part of this industry. And I'd like to, find out from everybody what that was. So we'll start with you, Buddy. What was the comic that you read or, saw, something you saw that got you into comics and wanted to write them and be a part of this whole thing?
Great question. So I was a kid reading comics at a time where reading comics was totally uncool. And it was one of those greatly tightly held secrets. Mm-hmm. I was pedaling home on my bicycle from my friend's house, and I sort of saw this stack of papers on the side of the road, and I took a stop on my bike, and there were all these what we would call now adult magazines. And I looked at them and I was like, ew. And I put them to the side, and underneath were comic books. And I took the comic books, and I had a distinct memory of reading, this was an old trashed issue, and I still have it, of Conan the Barbarian number 24, which was the final issue by Barry Windsor Smith and the first appearance of the original Red Sonja. And it was the first time I ever looked at the credits and I went, like, who did this? And I had been reading comics up until that point my whole life, but I never really stopped and went, somebody did this. And I looked and I saw the name Barry Smith and thought, somebody makes comics. And that was an epiphany for me as a kid, that somebody other than Stan Lee made comics. And that was more or less sort of that moment that clicked for me. And I was like, I can make comics. And forevermore, I did, honestly, strangest thing, I found the comics in the trash. I took them home, and my father said, why don't you go knock on the guy's door and see if he has other comics? Now, he basically sent a 12-year-old boy to a stranger's house to knock on the door to see if there were still comics there. The guy let me in his house. He's like, yeah. I went home. I fetched some money, and he sold me Amazing Spider-Man 14 for $20. At that point, my mother thought it was outrageously expensive. Wow. And I got all the early Spider-Mans at that point, all the Conans and X-Men from him for about $20 a pop. What is strange, again, is that my father sent a 12-year-old boy alone to a strange man's house to see if he had comic books.
It was a different time in 2017. It was a different time.
No, it was not a different time.
Now, yeah.
There were still evil people in the world, Erin. It's just my father did not think much of sending me to a stranger's house to knock on the door.
And you're still doing it.
They were like, it'll be fine.
So I want to throw a quick Buddy fun fact in there. Buddy was actually part of the foundation of my love for comics because he did spend a lot of time working at Wizard Magazine. And I never missed an issue. And that was a real strong backbone of where I went to find my new comics then. So, again, thank you for that time you spent working over there, Buddy. You actually helped, give me a little bit of foundation back then too.
Johnny, as much as I appreciate that you thank me for that, and I always take thanks. In fact, I ask Ari and Arielle to thank me frequently, but I got paid for that. So it wasn't like strictly charitable work. They gave me money and I went in. And then if they stopped giving me money, I would have stopped going in.
That's awesome.
Well, I was here for it.
Yeah. That's true. No, Wizard had a big impact on a lot of people's lives and really changed the industry in a lot of amazing ways. And, one day we should really talk about that and unpack how it influenced people in so many different ways and just changed the face of what we know comics to be, paving the way for things like this, which was like an enthusiastic fandom that quite literally is the voice of comics now. You guys are doing some amazing work, and I'm really honored that you have us on the show.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's like a throwback. A Wizard was, amazing back in the day, and I wish we had something like that now. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem it seems like you only have websites now, like
it's called Indie Comics Relay every Wednesday, every Wednesday at 9 p.m.
That's right.
I'm gonna point I gotta point to the logo.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's right above you there. So let's move on to Arielle. What was that book or that you read or something you saw that you had to be part of the comics?
Actually, it was kind of my parents who told me. I always had an active imagination as a childhood. Okay. And they said, if only we can channel this for good.
I get similar story, yeah.
And so as I grew up, I started drawing, and my grandparents taught me how to draw. Actually, the yellow is in remembrance. Oh, cool. And I learned to draw, and I later went to SVA and graduated with a BFA in animation.
Okay.
And so after graduating, I was having trouble. Actually, I forgot a while back. The first thing I knew about comics was a boogie board that my grandparents had at the beach that had Wolverine on it.
Okay.
And for some reason, I called it Herman.
You called the board Herman or Wolverine Herman?
The board Herman.
Okay.
But flash forward, after graduating college, I didn't know what to do. And my uncle actually told me, hey, I have a friend named Buddy who works in comics. Maybe I can get you guys hooked up. And then, long story short, I became intern 1. And now I've graduated since then. And I've just been drawing ever since. This was actually my first comic that I've made. I've always
really?
Congratulations.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
I've always had like this nerd knowledge and comic knowledge just from like hearing things around and just knowing innately. So it's not necessarily me reading the comics. I just know from hearing everything. And I'm just like,
just being bombarded with it from everything. Yeah.
People often ask me, what's your favorite superhero or what Marvel are you seeing? I'm like, I don't know. I can have a valid reason for both.
It's really changed a lot because I come from, what Buddy was saying when it was not cool to be into comics. And like, yeah, Buddy knows. I knew when it changed about 8 years ago, or maybe about 10 years ago at this point. Like I was hanging out with some friends and we saw little kids walking around with like X-Men shirts. And I'm like, see that? When I was growing up, if you wore that, you were dead. You were getting your ass kicked, So that's when I knew stuff had changed, So how about you, AA? What was that book that, made you had to be a part of the industry?
Well, so here's the thing. I read comics as a kid. I read some great comics as a kid. My orthodontist actually had the later Frank Miller run on Daredevil, which was my guy from the beginning, Daredevil. But as a writer, the guy who really inspired me was J.R.R. Tolkien, and I was writing prose for a very, very long time before I started to write comics. And actually, I had this story that I couldn't make work as a prose story, and I was like, well, what am I going to do with it? And around the same time, I was getting back into comics through Neil Gaiman, who I read first in his prose stories, because we went from Douglas Adams because, I was in the same, as you guys, Keith and Buddy, where it wasn't cool and you heard these things. So, it's the same type of thing with the sci-fi stuff. We had, Douglas Adams, and then, like, what do you read after you finish Hitchhikers? It was Good Omens with, which was Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. So I read, actually, Neil Gaiman's prose novels first, and then I was like, this guy's cool. I like this guy's a really good writer. And, so I was working at the time in Midtown. I had to walk by Jim Hanley's Universe, every day on the way back and forth to the subway. If you guys remember that place. And, I went in there. I bought the first trade of Sandman, and I rebought all my old Frank Miller Daredevils and the Sin Cities and got into all the Alan Moore stuff like that. And actually, when I had this story, and I was like, okay, around that time, I realized that the story that I wanted to write, the reason I couldn't write it as a prose story was because it needed to be a graphic novel. And at that time, the only thing that I could find about how to write a graphic novel or how to write a comic script in general was in the back of one of, I think it was trade paperback 3 or 4 of the Sandman that had one of his scripts in the back, and I copied it out and I figured out how it worked, and that's how I got started writing comics. And now I write in a whole variety of different mediums, but one of them is comics, and it's really because of Neil Gaiman.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, because Neil Gaiman, I think that a lot of people were influenced by him, especially growing up in the 80s. Definitely an inspiration. Doing both, actually, like you said, prose and a genius in both, I think, prose and comics, So
I've read a lot of Ari's work, and a lot of his influences permeate his writing. And forgive me, Ari, I forget the title of the book that I wrote, the little segment for the little review thing?
The Night Prowler. Yeah, it's not. It was delayed. It was delayed because of COVID. I don't have a release date yet, but it should be coming out soon.
But even so, that was a wonderful story that definitely it was rife with noir and had tones of Frank Miller just permeating throughout the whole thing. When I loved it. I thought it was great. But you could definitely see where your influences, reinforced your comic work.
Thank you. I think if you get compared in the same sentence to Frank Miller, you take that, right?
Yeah, right. You have to.
Yeah.
How about you, Erin? Is there a comic or a book or something like that inspired you to be a part of this whole industry?
Well, I didn't realize this until like maybe 2 weeks ago. That I've always drawn. Like we used to go pick up my dad from the office or my mom, when she worked at the hospital, and it would be like, oh, we're almost done. Here's a pad of paper and a pen, draw something, right? And you just doodled, whatever. And so I drew all the time, constantly, from as far back as I can remember. And we used to watch the Disney show and the Walt Disney specials on Sunday. And so I got into animation, and I loved cartoons. And the best thing about comic books was that there were cartoons you could hold on to, when the TV stopped playing your favorite cartoon, or when it wasn't Saturday morning, when we used to have Saturday morning, you had that comic book all the time, And I had an older brother, so I was into all the boy things. And it was like, well, you're a girl, but I guess you can come because, you're so-and-so's sister or whatever. And so I used to do a lot of that. But eventually I got to the point where, like, especially in the 80s and early 90s, where comics were uncool, right? So if you weren't in a group of nerds, you kind of had to be careful who you talked to. But also, oh, you're a girl. Here's the girl comics. I got a lot of that. I got like, well, you can read Archie or Betty and Veronica, but like, this is X-Men. This is for boys. Or, this is Sandman. This is not for girls, And so I got a lot of that. And I kind of was like, screw you. I'm going to read it anyway. So
That's great.
I ended up being sort of my own closeted nerd in a whole different way. And I think a lot of girls that grew up in the 80s and 90s kind of understand that. I love the fact that we don't have to do that anymore. You can go to a con and you don't have to be cosplay Vampira to still contribute, which I love.
Yeah.
But so I got into animation. That's what I do professionally. And I was in a creative slump and met Buddy, and he's like, well, why don't you just make a comic? It kind of all goes back to Buddy, not to inflate his ego, but that's really. And so
He lives for the inflated ego.
Yeah. He loves it. He knows he does. So, and I was like, I don't know, why not? Right? I could totally do that. I draw all the time. And the reason that 2 weeks ago was such a pivotal thing for me is that because I'm moving, I'm in the middle of moving, I'm packing up all my stuff, I'm going through all my old artwork, trying to figure out, what to digitize, what to throw away, that kind of thing. And somebody had posted to one of our forums, like, throw up something really old, some old piece of work that you did. And so I started going through my stuff, and I was like, I've been drawing comics forever. Like, every time I had a little story in my head, I just thumbnailed a little comic. I have 50 or 60 from every year of my life. I could just flip through and be like, I drew this comic. This is a story that I wrote. And it was 2 weeks ago. I was like, I've always drawn comics. I just didn't know I was doing it. So,
what a wonderful realization to have.
It was really nice. And then I got on these calls, and I'm like, I'm already a comic book writer. I just didn't get published.
Well,
so there you go.
It's like what Buddy was saying, where he saw the credits and it finally clicked with him. Like, I think that we all have that eureka moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, the sudden realization that your creativity is there and you are, in fact, a creative person,
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Before we go on, let me see.
Also, the sudden realization that there's a lot of people on your YouTube channel and your Facebook page.
Yeah, I was going to just say, let's say hi to everybody. We got Marnie here tonight. Hey, Marnie.
Big shout out to everybody checking us out.
My boy Roland's here. My wife's here. Harry's here.
As long as your wife's here, we're
yeah, right.
She's here to keep people alive.
Yeah. What is
She's
glad to hear. I am part of the council along with your guests. Awesome. Great to see. Yeah, so we got a lot of people here tonight. And people, anyone watching, if you guys have questions for our guests, definitely start putting them in the chat, and we'll get to them as we go along here. So now that we know the origin, the next thing I would love to know, well, Buddy, we'll start with you. I saw, you have the comic book school. How did that come together? Is that something that you been doing for a while, or is that something that's recent?
Yeah, I got into this stuff quite by accident. I was, you mentioned Wizard. I ran the Wizard online forums, and we were looking for ways to ensure that we could align with the magazine. And we were going to try to adapt Brutes and Babes. If you guys remember, Bart Sears was doing Brutes and Babes in an educational column. And we were told that we couldn't use it. They didn't have clearance to run it online. At that time, it was very new. So I created something called Wizard School with Russ Wooten, who is now a very famous comic book letterer. And the idea was we were just going to try to get organic learning because, like a lot of you, I wanted to, like Ari, like I wanted to learn how to make comics, but there was no way. Hold on.
That's your intro music, right?
Yeah, Johnny would like that. We're thunderstruck. There you go, Arielle. And I created Wizard School with Russ, and the idea was we wanted to learn how to make comics. There wasn't much out there. Scott McCloud had a book, Will Eisner had a book, but there wasn't a huge amount. And that just sort of evolved one day into photo reference, and I made photo reference CD-ROMs, which turned into photo reference books. And at a certain point, I realized I needed something to formalize this. And I was already doing panels at cons, and I just said, well, let me just see if the website URL comicbookschool.com is available, and it was. Mm-hmm. And I just started, but I started doing panels at the very first Wizard Chicago show before it became C2E2, the first Wizard World show in 90-something or other. And they were like, okay, you're going to run panels, go. And I had no idea what to do. So I did educational panels because it seemed to me the most practical thing to do. And, one day I just decided to start Comic Book School with a single blog post and did panels. And now it just has its own momentum. It's created its own gravity, and we have our own community. And it started off as an idea and has grown into what I think is truly a movement to empower people to say, you don't need permission to make comics. You can make comics like Erin. It's like, I've been making comics all along. I just didn't realize I was doing it. And we were like, yeah, do it.
I think we need that more than ever, Buddy, not to get too into the comic politics stuff, but like with affiliated groups and, people who feel like they need to be validated by certain figureheads. You don't need that. You have a great community of independent creators all around you. And, Buddy's put that together here with the Comic Book School and with a wonderful example of an anthology of, bringing together, and again, people I've met before, people who are friends of mine, people I'm so proud to see within the pages of this book that you guys have worked really hard to put together.
Yeah, and I definitely want to talk more about the anthology too, but I agree with you. There's not a lot of, if you wanted to just make comics, there's not a lot of info out there. Even now, I don't think, I'm going to definitely steer people towards Comic Book School. I'll put a link in the video when we put this on the channel as well. I think it's a fantastic idea. I'm glad that you're doing something like this. That someone is, you know what I mean?
Well, and I think, and here's the thing about the internet, and you guys know this to be true. There's a lot of people who give bad advice incredibly well. They're very polished people who will take your money and give advice. And you guys will probably see, and the anthology team here will know this. I have a journalism background. I don't spend a lot of time telling you how to do it. I spend a lot of time curating opportunities, and I brought in other comic book creators because I just feel like that is a role that I can play. Like I can bring people in, and we've had other creators speak. And that was the thing about Comic Book School. I was dismayed about people who gave advice about breaking in or making comics who hadn't actually done it. And I wouldn't give advice to a pilot on how to land a plane or a surgeon or how to do surgery. So I just thought, like, this is important stuff. We should ask those people. And I'll stop in a minute, but if you guys know the panels, the idea was always that we don't, I'm not going to get anywhere asking Jerry Ordway or Sean Chen to describe their process. I gave them a pad and markers, and I'm like, just show us how you do it. And I think that was an epiphany for me, which is to say, that's why you go to panels and all the panelists are like this, right? They teach with their hands. And I think that that's what we got out of all these these panels. But you know, Erin will tell you, I have no short answers. So I'm just going to stop talking.
No, I think that's awesome, and you know, it's like, and what Johnny was saying too is like not being beholden to anybody. Like I think indie comics are where it's at right now. I mean, Marvel and DC are falling apart. You see it in the news every day. People getting laid off.
So curated, right?
What's that?
It's so curated, right? They've got a certain number of heroes, and if it doesn't fit my hero story, they don't create a new superhero. They bend some other hero to fit the new narrative they need, right?
Yeah.
We don't see a continuation of the heroes that we grew up with, or they're, you know, to some extent new heroes are created, but it's always the same 12 people, right? It's always the same group. It's always the same story. It's, you know, X-Men number 7,422. It's Superman reinvented in a new universe, right? We don't get a new person, a new thing, right? And then also, to Buddy's credit, like, we have this community, and Buddy never said, "Oh, show me your book. Like, you're not good enough." Like, there's no barrier to entry here, you know?
Yeah,
you learn as you go. If you put out a book, you know? You will learn so much more by actually doing it than practicing to do it. And that's what I think we learned here. And it's everybody should do it. Everybody should do it. Even if it may be not the most perfect, you know, Mona Lisa, that's okay. Because you're going to learn more. You're going to learn more finishing the book and going, okay, I finished it. This is what I've learned. Now go on to the next one.
Yeah, like I think that's definitely true. And, you know, it's like there's a lot of people that do the talk, but, you know, you got to do the walk eventually. If you're going to make comics, you just got to do it. Whether you fail or succeed your first time, it's all learning, you know. It's all like gaining that perspective, you know. So getting back to this anthology. So how did all four of you guys kind of come together? Is that like an interesting story? Is it like the Fantastic Four origin?
Go for it.
Yeah,
Ari actually asked
gamma
me.
rays.
Yeah, Frightful Four. Or
Gamma rays, radioactive spiders. You know, planets and distant galaxies blowing up. The whole thing. You know.
Listen, don't talk about the orphan bit, but he gets very upset when you talk about his parents.
So anyone want to take that? Or
Ari approached me at the 2019 Creator Connection at the pub, and we exchanged cards. And then once Buddy said, "Hey, we're going to do the anthology," Ari has seen my work, and he asked me, "Hey, can you draw the comic for me?" And I'm like, "Okay, I mean, yeah, I can draw whatever style presented with a reference, but just let me know what kind of style you're looking for and I'll adapt to that." And he's like, "I want to go for like kind of almost 90s, almost like the TV show Superman, but you know, me, not Ari." And I'm like, okay, so I did that, and we ended up creating Mr. Stupendous.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's one of the stories I looked at today. That one was really good.
Yeah, I was going to say that was one of my favorites out of the book too, the Mr. Stupendous one.
Really?
Honest to God, it was. I love that it was just like a flip on the whole, like, you know, a bad day for like the, you know, the working husband. He just happened to be a superhero, you know.
Yeah,
It was a hell of
so well at the end. It was just great. I loved it.
We say that he might be the most powerful man in the world, but in the end, his problems are all too human.
Yeah, that's
I like
true.
that.
That's true. I love that the other superheroes, like the wife's still in control, you know, like that's totally what like office banter would be like. And I love that you kind of put that in a superhero context, you know?
Yeah. It was a lot of fun to draw, especially the villain.
Thank you. But yeah, I think when we're talking, I think your question was at first about how we started the anthology, how they came together, and I think we should start with Erin's conversation with Buddy.
I misunderstood.
No worries. I love that you
I
love
want to
to
talk about
what you did.
as much as possible. Yeah, I mean,
So basically, I mentioned before that I'm working as an animator professionally. I was in a bit of a creative rut, and a cousin of mine said, "Well, why don't you come to Comic-Con? Like, it's amazing, you know, it'll inspire you." And so I went. I'd never been to a con that big before. I've been to a couple small, like, local town cons, and it kind of blew me away. But one of the things that I searched out was all of the, creative learning panels, So I went to a lot of Buddy's panels. I went to a lot of others too. And Buddy's were, in my opinion, and probably in most people's opinion, the best of the bunch, because it was the only one that wasn't trying to sell you on a school. It wasn't buy my CD-ROM so you can become a comic book writer. It was give me a call and let's talk about how we can make you a comic book writer. And so I went to the creator panel. I went to the creator connections. For the best of my ability, I was 5 minutes out from closing down that bar, but man, you guys are better at it than I am. I need more practice with that. So
we're just a little bit more seasoned and our livers are a little bit more swollen.
It must be. So I went to Texas too long. The cold shut me down. So I went to Buddy and I was like, well, Buddy actually asked, he's like, what's your deal? Like, why are you coming to these panels? What do you want to accomplish? And he seemed so actually interested in me personally that I was like, okay, well, I might as well talk to this guy. He seems like a good guy. And we sat down and he's like, well, what is it going to take to get you to create? Like, why are you not doing it? And I said, really, all the regular things, fear of success, fear of failure, it's not perfect, whatever. And he goes, okay, well, just have a comic by next year. And I was like, I don't know that I can do that. He goes, 8 pages, you could totally do it. And I was like, okay. So I went home, I put together a schedule. I kind of broke it down according to the animation steps that I understood. And then I sent it to Buddy and I said, what do you think? And he said, well, this is not what we call it in comics, but it's the same steps. Let's, shift some stuff around. Let's get a professional opinion on like what the schedule is. This is a really good schedule. Do you mind if I share it? And I was like, no, definitely share it. So we shared it with the whole community. And within a month, 2 months, we had a number of people going, I want to do this. I want to be in on this. And before I knew it, we were so busy helping everybody make comics that I forgot to do my own between 2020 and COVID. So next year,
I love that.
But yeah. I did get a flash fiction piece, and I kind of bring this up a lot with Ari. Ari got to the point where he was like, look, there's a lot of people who maybe didn't get the email. 2020 was a rough year for everybody. They didn't get in, fast enough to do 8 pages. Can we do some other things? There's an opportunity to do flash fiction pieces. So he added those on. But, we started building these forums and building this community, and a shout out to all the people in the backstages and the council that we kind of had in the wings helping out, who, put aside their time, volunteered their time and effort to sort through emails and Google calendars and figure out what platform we needed to be on, and help with tech support and help with moral support, and pinging people and Twitter. And, there was a bunch of things that we didn't anticipate when just putting out these challenges. And then Buddy updated the website and the newsletter. And before we knew it, we had this whole community of people that was producing all this content. And we had Ari and Arielle teaming up to do Mr. Stupendous. And then we had a bunch of people do flash fiction pieces. And then we got to the end and we were like, okay, well, we might as well publish this. But he's like, this stuff is good. Let's put it out there for people to read. And I was like, okay. So we did. And now we have 143 pages of an anthology.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I hope everybody reads it. So
I was shocked when I opened up the PDF and I saw such a huge book. Because normally anthologies they are a little bit more streamlined than that, but you guys were really all inclusive, and I love that. And I love that you gave a lot of people this opportunity. On top of that, just a little post note on what you said. It's funny when you're like a fledgling creator and you think about 8 pages, and it seems like this almost insurmountable task. And then once it's done, it's just like it's almost like a level up empowerment. Like you can now lift Mjolnir. You know what I mean?
Exactly like that.
Well, I think that, and then like Erin creating that schedule, it just kind of makes it real for some people, I think, too, you know, like. Because
there was an end date to it, when you're on your own and you're trying to figure this out, like I didn't know the steps. And so when I sent it to Buddy, and Buddy's like, no, this isn't a step we need in comic books, but this is actually 2 steps. Or, you forgot lettering is a separate step in comics. And, you don't need a storyboard in comics, but you do need roughs and thumbnails. So we worked through it. And that gave me I understood the whole picture versus just create a comic. Because that is an insurmountable task.
You actually broke it down into bite-sized chunks. Which
it makes it easier for people to digest and see. If I have this. True. If I have this by this time, then I have this time to do this and this time to do, and you can see the finish line. Yeah. And it becomes something you can do.
I'd like to just add a correction to Erin's memory.
Okay.
Erin has a 20-book epic that she was going to do this year, right? Like last year. The story that she did as flash fiction is part of a much larger vision.
Okay.
And I think what
So we
Erin
just got a
was
little
committing to the
taste of
first
it.
time we started talking was this idea she was going to make, I don't know what you were going to make, 2 or 3 issues. And I was like,
Yeah.
you're not going to do 2 or 3 issues, which I think people are shocked by the directness of the conversations. And you guys know, like we're all, New York, New Jersey, we're direct. So I said, no, you're not going to do 2 or 3 issues. What you should see if you can do is 8 pages, which even at the time, Erin, as I remember, it was like, didn't seem like much, but you're like, no, this is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And it's not just 8 pages. The idea, the comics are not a sprint, they're a marathon. And there's a lot of little steps, and almost nobody does it all by themselves. It's rare. And it's hard, and it's a lot of work. And what Erin was able to do, even as she was framing this out for herself, and then we eventually thought, hey, we're going to, this can really go somewhere. I think, and Ari, maybe you can touch on this a little bit. It is really hard to write short fiction.
Oh, big time.
It's hard, right? Star Wars, right?
Ari's the one who's going to put this in a way that everybody can understand, because every time I talk to him about it, he makes it sound even better. But trying to cut down the world that I've built in my head to something that somebody else can enter into and experience and read the story of was probably the biggest challenge that I faced in doing this, right? Yeah. Taking just that expert for the flash fiction piece and making it make sense and getting it to grab people and getting people to feel like the characters were real and getting it to, brevity is not easy. Yeah. But also making it make sense and not having someone read the Similarian in order to understand one concept,
Yeah. Yep.
So you always say it better than I do.
So I just take from William Faulkner, who said that all novelists are failed short story writers. It's actually much harder to do. Writing a short story. Edgar Allan Poe thought it was the Edgar Allan Poe thought it was the second purest form after poetry. It actually goes back to Aristotle. They talk about the unity of effect, that when you're watching a play, which is what Aristotle was writing about, the audience is captive for that time. You have them for that entire time. When you're writing, I said, I loved reading Sandman. I'm not reading 12 volumes of Sandman in one sitting. It's like, you're not doing that. You can watch whatever, right? How many Avengers movies are there? 24 or so, right? You're not. People said, "Oh yeah, we do them back to," but the whole time. People aren't doing that. You come out every 2 years, you leave the world, you come back in. Yeah. A short story, or a short anything, a short comic, a short film, anything that you do creatively short, you have the reader for the entire story. Yeah, and that's something that makes the experience more pure, and you have to really take advantage of that, because you don't have time to do that backstory. I always think of if you guys know Catcher in the Rye, and Holden, when he's reading his essay and they're screaming digression at him, and he's like, I like the digressions. And yeah, when we read novels, we like the digressions. But when you do a short story, or when you don't have space for it. You have 8 pages to do a comic. You figure you're not going to have more than, they tell you 25 words a bubble, 5 or 6 bubbles a page, right? I mean, you don't have that much space to do this kind of thing. I mean, count up the panels, what are you going to, you have to, and the other thing about doing it as a comic that's different than doing it in other mediums, I think it's unique to comics, is that in comics, we said we did 8 pages. When I've been in other anthologies, I've done 4 pages or 8 pages, or you do 12 page. A comic is 22 pages because of the ads, but it's really 24, and a lot of them used to be 24 at one point. But everything needs to be a multiple of 4 because of the printing. And that's unique in comics, because when you read a prose novel, no one cares if there's 3 blank pages at the end. They put in a house ad, they'll put in a list of what else the author did. You don't write a page, you you do it in journalism. My buddy was talking about it. In journalism, I have a little bit of a journalism background too, where they say, I'm giving you 3 inches, and you know, based on your font or your 2 columns or whatever, you know how much you can fit in there. But in comics, it needs to be 8 pages. You can't get to page 6 and be like,
I'm done. Yeah.
I don't know. Or like get halfway through page 7 and you're like, I need 3 more pages. No, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's like
figure it out.
It's like playing the blues more than like, jazz or symphony. So you have to stay within that framework. Yeah. So it's actually really, really, it's a good exercise as a writer or as an artist, any kind of storyteller in restraint, but also in, working your story, making your idea fit into that form that you need it to be.
I think what's cool about what Ari is talking about, I'm sorry, Johnny, I think
no, go right ahead.
Is that, the act of doing it has given everybody a greater confidence in knowing what it takes to do it. Arielle, I met Arielle. I thought her artwork was wonderful, but I'm sure, Arielle, you saw what it was like. Comics are made one panel at a time.
I made storyboards for school. I made storyboards. Like I said, I went to school for animation. So I did storyboards. And when I went to do the comic, I'm like, I actually had these back and forths with Ari. We're like, where's the camera located? And he's like, and so he had to almost reword the script so that way I could understand where the camera was located. And we had some continuity things and getting to 8 pages. Yes, it doesn't seem like a lot, but there's multiple drawings on a single page. So in that case, you're doing at least maybe, depending on the thing, at least maybe 24 drawings.
Well, you know what'll happen, Arielle, once you gain more confidence in yourself and doing comics, is a lot of the writers will just kind of describe it for you and then leave that up to you to pick the camera angle and all that fun stuff, but it comes with time and doing it,
Yeah.
What'd you say, Johnny?
I said a good writer will paint that image for the artist.
Yeah.
In the head.
Yes.
I mean, most of the time his script had that, and especially in the 9-page thing, which was his favorite page for me to draw. He said, dead center, head on, and then for the next page, seen from above. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So some writers will do that.
There's certain, because there's certain things when you're writing it that you're like, this is what I want to do. And then there's certain things where you want to give freedom to the artist because they're the artist and you want to give them enough freedom to draw it in. When I write a script, I'm always, I tend to describe more than some people do, probably because the scripts I read at first were the Neil Gaiman scripts, which tend to be wordy, and the
Alan Moore ones.
The Alan Moore ones are entirely. You'll get the all caps 5-page description.
Yeah, it's like reading a chart of the elements.
But I always, I tell them right at the beginning, if it's not working for you, let me know and come back. We'll adjust it. And that was one other interesting thing about this project because, and I mentioned this before, but I think that one of the things about working in this community was that because this was the collaborative anthology for Comic Book School, and because we were working together over a year, it wasn't like anyone hired anyone. So if I write a script and I hire an artist to draw my script and I'm paying them to do it, that's a very different relationship than if you are collaborating with someone as equals, like what Arielle and I were doing and what, I believe everyone in our book was doing, or at least the vast majority of them were doing. It's a different type of creative relationship and it allows for more back and forth. And that ends up being helpful to both people.
It seems like you guys put all the creators through the process of doing it to help sharpen themselves. So not only did you show them this is the product that you can put out, you also especially for the fledgling individuals, but you help them improve their processes and by basically putting them through the rigor of it. And so this is how you put it out. This is how you put it. And then in the end, you gave them this wonderful book that they have as not only an example their work, something they can add to their resume, but also something that when they're promoting or when they're out in the field, they can say, hey, look, I'm among a bunch of really great creators that were involved in this book. And the more people have that book on the table, the more fans that see that, you know, it becomes that much more widespread.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, the other thing about doing it in the comic book school community was that because we were all teamed up with lots of different people, you got feedback from your group, from your writer, your letterer, your colorist, right? But you also got feedback from the community, right? And so you got a diverse group of opinions that you could pull critique from, that you could get comments from. You know, if you maybe haven't ever drawn from that angle, if you maybe have never written, you know, from this point of view, you could ping things, you know, off of people and say, you know, how do you feel about this? Or do you feel like this is working? That I don't feel like you have as much in a lot of professional environments. It's very like, you know, I'm getting paid to do this. I need to do this. This is my deadline, right? Whereas this was very collaborative, and it I think it helped not only the people who've worked in comics before, but or have done some professional work, but it helped the people who are new because they could see the other side of the coin. As the writer, you could see what the artist was struggling with. As the letterer, you could see what the colorist went through. And so it lended a lot more to the learning process than just doing the comic on your own or doing the comic for a professional getting paid job, because you could have that interaction. And I love that. That happened throughout our community and throughout the book. So
you can see that you guys elevated each other in the process here. Even just turning the pages, it's very apparent. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think another thing was that throughout the year, Buddy continued the panels, and he brought on pros to give panels at the various stages. So when Erin's schedule, so like, for example, when the story pitches were due, he wrote a blog with a story pitch for an Avengers story that he wrote, and that was there, and you could read the one that he sent to Marvel and the comments from his editor back, and then we had his editor on to do a live panel, and you know, they talked about the process going forward. When it was pencils, he had Ron Lim, who drew his story, doing a panel with us. And the really cool thing about the way that we did it that was different from even going to the cons was that because we had the message board, a lot of the people from the panels ended up with their own thread on the message board where you could end up asking them a question, not only there on the spot as they're presenting, like you do, you know, like always in the panels, you get the last 10 minutes, you might get your question answered, you might not, you have to think of it on the spot. But let's say, you know, you got this panel, and then 2 weeks later, you think of something, and you're like, you know what? I really wish I asked.
Yeah.
You know, you could post it on the message boards, and a lot of the pros that we had on would actually respond to you and give you that feedback throughout the year.
Really cool.
And I've seen that in at least one other place that's doing it. The difference is they're charging a pretty significant fee per month to have access to these people, whereas
of course,
comic book school is free for everyone. And I think
great.
that, you know, so when we were like, there were some really, one thing that I remember was, I think it was during the editing thing when we were doing the script, and Buddy was talking about the Hulk, and it was a kid's comic, and they said to add in, first of all, that you had to say, like, identify the character by name because people might not be familiar with the Hulk, and we all assume that somebody would. But there was one part where it was like, this is a hard concept for kids to get, so because it was an all ages comic, so that I think they like added the Ghost of the Hulk behind Bruce Banner. Is that what happened? You know, and that kind of thing that you wouldn't, you know. I've been reading comic books for years. I've been writing comic books for less time, but still for years. I wouldn't have thought of that. And to hear that kind of back and forth that came between Buddy and his editor, like, those were things that were really helpful. Especially because there were no cons for you to go and go to things like that.
You know, it's always good to have another set of eyes looking at everything, you know, like besides yourself. Sometimes you get so lost in the story you're telling that it takes other people to kind of point out, you know, this ain't working, or this is working, you should do more of this. And, you know,
creative blinders, that's what I kind of like to call it. What you do is just me, even in the creative process, I zero in on specific things, and then you lose sight of the forest from the trees in terms of like even common logic. You get so focused or zeroed in on like, this is a thought process of where the scene is going. And then, it takes just a simple another set of eyes to see, oh, well, you could have just done this. And then it's like, oh, that works way better.
I call that hyper-focusing.
Yeah, it's very easy to fall into that trap in the creative process too. So, being in a part of a community and, once again, elevating each other, I think is fantastic that you have that to lean on,
Oh yeah, definitely. And what I'd like to do now to show everybody in the audience, I'd love to show the trailer for the anthology that you guys made. So here, let me bring that up here.
While he's bringing that up, I just wanted to mention, reading a couple of the stories, I noticed some seem to be like launching platforms for other books. Jack Holder's story seems like that could spin off into its own thing. Chris Burgos' Teddy's seems like something that could be its own book. I'd love to see a Mr. Stupendous ongoing. So, you know what I mean?
I'm bored.
Was that by design? Or was that something that just was kind of like a happy accident, or?
Well, if Ari wants me, I'll still do it.
I mean, we're planning on doing it, but I think it depends on the creative team. Some people had ideas that they were going to put a short story based on one of their characters that they either had a series for or were planning a series for. Some people were creating things from the start. They might have just wanted to do a one-off or whatever. Some people created something and after creating it decided, that this would be kind of cool to continue. So I think it varied from creator to creator depending on the individual people involved.
I was really glad to see that though, because you had this very inclusive platform to give them the opportunity to do that, to launch their original characters, to launch their original stories, but also be in the context of an anthology where there's like a certain thematic coalescence,
Oh yeah, definitely. All right, so let's
take a trailer here.
Yeah, let's take a look and see some of the artwork and some of the stories that we've been talking about here. So, all right, so let's go.
That was a great story.
Uh-oh. Oh, there we go. Technical difficulties. Awesome.
That was awesome.
And that trailer was put together by our very own Arielle, who did an awesome job. By the way. We all
you did a great job on that. That's a great trailer.
Thank you.
So that
Tiny sounds great.
Anybody could go to Comic Book School and grab that copy of that for free and read everything. Is that true? Oh wow,
yes.
that's fantastic.
Do you guys have a print copy planned at all for the future by any chance, or
Buddy?
Erin, I have to answer. We going back to the Genesis, I think one of the things that was important to note was when Erin and I started this, we were thinking, we would be happy if we had, 2 or 3 submissions, and it became a much bigger project, and we had only budgeted a few weeks for production, and it took us a lot longer to get to the production. So we had decided, look, in order to save our sanity and the relationships with the people that we love, we would keep this as a digital only for now. But there has been interest in a print on demand. I think when we start going to cons again, there's a possibility that we could repaginate it to do a short run. Because as you guys know, you go to a con, you need something to sell. And some people put some real work into this. And we might do a print on demand. But I think at this point, our next energy will be focused on a follow-up. But going to something that you had earlier mentioned, one of the things we wanted to do is leave this open for people to decide what kinds of stories they wanted to do and to own their own work. We actually had a legal advisor, somebody who's on the challenge, who's a lawyer, who helped us to ensure that everybody maintained control and ownership of their own work. And that, I think, freed people up to give the best of what they had because they knew that in the end, it was there. And they can decouple this from the anthology and republish it if they'd like. There's no limitations on that. And we hope that those people do use this as a launching pad. I jokingly noted Erin's epic, which I got to tell you, she's told me the story and it's really good. And I'm hoping that a lot of the other people have these bigger stories that will carry on. So Erin came in with an idea. Ari and Arielle invented an idea, but I think it's just a matter of encouraging people, just keep going, keep doing this. This is an industry of doers. And we always, if you guys have worked in comics for a while, every pro asks every other pro, so what are you working on? You don't want to have no answer. This is what people are working on. And I think that that's the really important thing is we gave people a good answer and then hopefully they will carry on with it. And
on top of that,
one last thing I'll just say, we left it open, completely open. But Erin and I have been talking. We were like, we think we're going to do the next one, and we'll announce it soon. People should sign up for the newsletter, and we'll announce it there. But we're going to give people a prompt, and we're going to just see how people do a prompt. One of the reasons for that is because when I was doing Richie Rich, they were literally, here's Richie Rich, and I got a list, and there were 7 words in order, and it was like Richie Rich. Pirates, Richie Rich, Loch Ness Monster, Richie Rich, Outer Space. And I was like, okay. So that's more or less what we're going to be doing.
Gotcha.
I love that, though. It leaves it creatively open to take whatever interpretation you want, I'm
sorry, Erin, you were about to say something, and I can't stop talking.
I'm lost on Richie Rich on a pirate ship feeding
And
the
Loch Ness Monster.
I'd read that.
Aaron always locks in on the pirate idea. They would have like 7 words there and it came back
Always.
to pirates.
If there's a mermaid on there.
Who doesn't like pirates?
Everybody loves pirates.
Everybody loves
Sorry,
pirates.
Erin.
Like
Go ahead.
pirates.
You were going to say something. Go ahead, Erin.
I was going to say, one of the things that Buddy mentioned was like, when you do talk to professionals, one of the first things they say is like, what are you working on? Right. And it, in every creative industry, that's what you're going to get asked. But also it's, okay, you said you were working on this last time we talked. Where is it? And the thing that I love about comic book school is we did it. We made this comic book. And so then we all know the next question is, okay, what's next?
Yeah.
So this is what's next. And while I think that there, as we get interest in this book, as we go back to cons, as people want something in their hand to sell, we'll definitely take a look at printing it and seeing what the options are to get not only the people who created it, but, some of the people who worked backstage basically in the community, to get their hands on, a nice printed copy, not something out of your sort of library printer. But we don't want that to curtail the next issue. We want to keep moving forward. So there's that.
Yeah, you guys could probably like crowdfund something like this, to pay for the printing. I think that would be grey.
I was actually thinking Johnny C would throw in a little cash tonight.
Oh, yeah.
There you go, Johnny.
I think that's what we talked about, Johnny. You were throwing in some cash.
Yeah, maybe throwing some cash in. I don't know.
Throw some crypto around.
Bitcoin.
This is
I
after
have
we
to
just
go talk to the capo for some money.
It's after we spent almost an hour talking about how we don't ask for money. It's free. We don't ask for money.
But let's ask for money.
I'm actually
I'm kind of jealous I wasn't in this first volume. I don't know. I missed the email, like Ari said, but I'll be definitely looking forward to the next one to try to weasel my way in, and then I'll bring all the money.
Yeah, right. I'm actually shocked that this was the first anthology Like I figured there would, Buddy, you would have had a bunch of anthologies in place prior to this.
Oh yeah, Buddy.
Yeah,
why didn't you have a bunch of
Yeah,
anthologies?
you would think I'd be productive, but it's more like squirrel. So,
I can testify that it's been on his mind since 2017 because that's the C2E2 where you mentioned it to us. So it's definitely been there. Cheers on that.
Yeah.
Definitely been there. It took a little bit of time to come to fruition. That's all.
Was this
Erin
like
to help bring it together?
Was this like the one good thing to come out of the pandemic? Was like this anthology?
Yes.
For me,
It's like an
yeah.
Indie Comics Relay.
That and Indie Comics Relay. Yeah, we
There you
started this show
Top two.
in the pandemic. So
I
We
think
started this prior to the pandemic. What was interesting was we were starting this literally on the floor October of the end of the 99 show. And it took us some time to get it.
2019. You go
2019,
decades back.
buddy.
2019.
Yes,
It's
not 1999. But go ahead.
We're partying like it's 1999. So come on.
That we are.
But it just happened to be, then, we real world events, right? The George Floyd happened and we kind of stopped. I mean, people, focused their attention on the real world. And then we talked again as a council and said, do we restart it? And their resounding answer was yes. People need to create, they need to express themselves with art. And, we got back into it. We had to make up for some lost time. I think on an existential level, Keith, yeah, I mean, the anthology is probably one of the best things for all of us to come out of this. But I think on a wider level, it's this friendship and this understanding that you really are not alone. Mm-hmm. And I think we find our tribes, we find our families. We have the family we're born into, and then the family that we grow into. And I think a lot of us are greatly appreciative of this family that we grew into.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Yeah.
I was just going to say real quick, I think one of the stories in your anthology really shows that example. And that was by Rob Anderson. I know that his story was autobiographical. Yeah. And knowing Rob personally, it was very touching to read that because it shows how appreciative he was of the community, of everybody, of his whole thing as a creator coming to basically his flourishing fruition, and I loved reading that. And I think of everything, that's been said, his story, not to kind of put a spotlight on his over anybody else's, but his story specifically, I think is such a shining example of the anthology overall.
Yeah, he brought a lot of himself into it, Johnny. And I think, you look at a guy like Rob and you realize, wow, the things that you do in life that we all do together, you never really know what the impact is. And, one of the basic principles of what we do in comics, not just at the comic book school, is to be encouraging. And it's a very encouraging business. Nobody's unhappy in comics. If you get into comics, you're happy because this is where you want to be. You might not be happy in another line of work. And to see Rob's story is such an emotional story because he went through so much. I found that to be inspiring as well. And I just think people should feel good about opening themselves up. That's what art is great at, is giving you an opportunity to open yourself up.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And you're doing a service for people too, like readers and, fans. Like, it's not just like you throw away, entertainment like some people have described it. I really think especially right now with the pandemic, people are finding entertainment and finding comics and finding movies and shows that they love. And I think it's a service,
I completely agree.
Yep.
Definitely.
I think
people don't really. Oh, sorry, Ari.
Go ahead.
I don't think people realize how much they rely on the arts and how much they consume. People always say, "Oh, art doesn't mean that anything," and then they just turn on Netflix or they watch the latest show, and literally though, there are a lot of people who put their work into that. That is art, and the fact that this year, especially given the fact that we are all at home and a lot of shows are now just on streaming, people have relied on the arts more this year than I think in a long time.
Yeah, I agree. Same thing with like games, video games. That's all art too.
Exactly. It's taken for granted.
Yep, big time.
And I think also as creators, though, that without the cons and without that place, like both professionally and creatively, that space is important to have a place to go to, where you can talk with your people. I mean, I noticed one thing that I noticed when I first started going to these cons and really trying to write comics and things, is it seemed like everyone knew each other. It seemed like a very small thing, and you kind of at first feel like you're on the outside. And the way that I met most of the people who I know in the indie comics community was either at Buddy's Creator Connections panel or at the Twins Pub after con thing in New York, where I met Johnny. Creator After Con. I met Johnny there a number of years ago, and that doesn't exist anymore. And one thing that Buddy always says, is the way you do networking is you close down the bar. You can't close down the bar if there's no bars, and you can't hit Artist Alley, give out cards, flip through people's art. That stuff's not going on right now. It's going to come back eventually, but it's not going on right now. So for a lot of people, and for a lot of us, it was a chance to do that, and to hang out with people. Like these things once a month. I'm home. I'm a teacher in my day job, and I'm on childcare leave, and everybody is home, and I deal with you're just with your family in the house all day. You have no outside connection to anybody, and to have the opportunity, even not just on the boards, but on the meetings that we had every month in the past, just to go on and to talk to people. That's something that was really needed in this past year, and I think that everyone in the community is appreciative of that.
And one of the other things that we talked about, sorry, Johnny, one of the other things that we talked about when a lot of that stuff came up, when it became very clear that the pandemic wasn't going to end in a month, and a lot of the George Floyd stuff and a lot of the protests. I mean, I'm 6 blocks from downtown Dallas. We had protests and riots for weeks, and it's very scary, dealing with a lot of that stuff. But we came back and we said, we are creators. We need to create. We need this space to create, but also we need to put out books for people. Like people need content. And a lot of the publishers said, put your pencils down. And I was like, no, now's the time to pick them up. Now's the time to create something to give people either, an introspective or an escape, whatever it is they're looking for. We as creators and as artists need to be able to provide that. It's for us to put out a story, and it's for other people to be able to consume it. And there was so little new content, I mean, if Netflix is going to make a show, let's face it, it's going to be probably in a comic book format before it hits Netflix, right? How many Marvel movies are there? How many DC movies are there, right? It's coming from us first. So we need to be able to fill that void of people sitting at home, going, I don't want to homeschool my kids, but I can't go out to a bar. I can't go see my friends. I can't, kiss my grandparents. I need something to do. Here's a comic. We made an anthology for people to say, this is what we've done. You guys can experience our 2020, our stories, whether, like I said, whether it's going into something and experiencing it or escaping from it, we provided that for people. And I think that was very important for all of us to do.
Stories for everyone, even.
Exactly.
Anybody can pick up this book. There really isn't like an age limit or a range or anything like that. It's really very much an all ages book.
Got a question for the audience too. Let's see what we got here.
I was just going to say, Ari, I think you fired off a synapse. I think I actually introduced you to Buddy at Creator After Con.
No, I had met Buddy at.
Had you met him?
I had met Buddy at his panel.
Okay.
It was the year before I met you, I believe.
I don't think that's true, Ari. I think I was your Uber driver, and I picked you up.
Yes. I was
running
standing.
from-
I was lost. I was lost outside trying to get to the Javits Center. I was like, Buddy came by and he's like, "You got this."
Ari, I hope you gave him 5 stars.
No, I think distinctly, Ari,
There was no Uber.
get me to a lawyer, and I don't remember what was happening there.
Yeah, that is something that I will say we can neither confirm nor deny. Well,
So the one question we got here is, what is there something that you guys would change about the process of the anthology? That's a good question, actually.
Personally, I wish I was a little bit more active on the forums. I had a lot going on in my life, and when I start drawing, like you said before, with like the creative blinders, my creative blinders is a little bit different. If I'm working on my art, I shut out literally everything. I turned down going to the beach twice just to finish this comic. I'm like, I can't talk, must work. Can't talk, must work. And in all honesty, that even when I was done, I was like, I didn't post it to the forums because I'm like, okay, now I need time to rest. But in hindsight, I wish I was a little bit more active, but there's always next year, and hopefully I can get my hyper-focusedness under control.
It's something to work on, right?
I've been working on that for 26 years.
Awesome. Anyone else have an answer or a comment about that question? Or
Go ahead, Erin.
I was going to let you go, buddy.
No, you gave me the other ones. Here, throw the lob over the wall to you.
Thank you. Okay. So I've worked as a project manager before. I tell Buddy all the time, I hated it. It was like the worst job I've ever done. Making sure other people get their crap done is like the most, hurtling. It's basically wrangling cats, and I hate it, but I was unfortunately good at it. And so I tend to fall back on those skills. So a lot of the stuff is sort of production-based stuff that I think we could improve communication, we could improve delegation. With the more people we get into the community, I feel like the more hands on deck we have, which is why I think some of these shows and getting more people involved is very important, because I got so involved in helping people make comics I didn't make my own. So that's the thing that I want to improve next year, is I want to contribute more from an artist standpoint, from a writer, from a creator standpoint. And in doing that, I feel like I need to slug off a lot of these sort of project management based skills, and it's one of those things that you get a new thing and you want to figure it out, you want it to be the best. And so you think, okay, how could I do this differently? How could I, and you don't want to delegate it to someone else because you want it done your way, or you want it done right, or whatever it is that is in your head that you think, I can't give this to someone else. I have to do it. I got to throw that out the window, because there are more than enough talented people in this community that can step up and do it. And 2020 was a hard year. So I get that people were like, I can do it, or I can't do it, or I thought I could do it, because there was so much going on. But I think next year we could just say, look, pick it up for 2 weeks, and then we can pass it to the next guy. Or, you're on call for Twitter notifications, or you're on call for managing, questions in the forum at such a time. And that way people can better plan. So that's sort of the thing I want to do. I want to create a comic, and you guys are all here to hold me accountable next year that, no more community, no more community excuses, Erin. My comic's going to be in the anthology next year. And that means, I need people to join in and step up and, be part of the community. So that's my 2 cents.
Awesome.
And I think that a lot of it is just fine tuning what we have. I think I mentioned I've worked as a teacher, and I remember my first year as a teacher, you're up till 4 a.m. writing lesson plans for your class at 8. And you're doing that every day, and you're kind of winging it your way through. And the next year, of course, you make changes and you refine it, but you've already done it, and you have something to work with. And then, every time, you don't need to recreate everything over again, and that leaves you time to work on the other things that you need to. So, we have all of those blog posts step by step by Buddy. Those are there as a resource. We don't, don't need to recreate that. We have Erin's schedule and the amount of time, and yeah, maybe you move a day, your deadline a couple of days earlier or later or whatever, but we basically have that, and it's just a matter of fine-tuning it a little bit. And then once, those little changes, you drop the little rock and it makes the ripples and all that kind of thing. But those little changes that you can make each time end up making a big difference and end up making you more efficient the next time. Because you're always scrambling to get it done the first time. And then, the second time and the third time and the fourth time, that's when you know how to really do it and you got your process down. And I think that a lot of it is a matter of that. And then also, like Erin said, that we have to do a little bit of a better job on delegating some of the responsibilities. But I think that will, come with, with also
time and experience.
Time,
yeah, exactly. Buddy, did you have anything?
Sorry, that being said, I mean, please don't change the things that did work: the inclusion, the support, the leveling up of creators, the pulling in the wisdom of people who are a little bit more seasoned to help out. All of that I think was executed so well, and I think I really urge anybody who's watching to take a moment to stop by the website and read the free sample and just to check it out.
Yeah, or even if you're a creator, inquire about being part of the anthology. This is the ground floor of comics. This is how you learn and then go on to make your own stuff and just be part of anthologies. And it's a great way to get into the business, I think.
Johnny, to your point, we are leveling up. We're just playing the game again at the medium level. When we get to the hardcore level, I'll let you know.
Yeah. That's great.
I think to your point, Johnny, I think at this point, we have a pretty good sense of what we think worked well, a pretty good sense of where we can optimize. But I think the key thing is look what you guys are doing here. You just do it, right? You just kind of sometimes just have to start. And I think the way we started this with Erin and I think was, it was a little tough because Erin and I have different working styles, but we figured out a way to make it work. I'm more of a, just get it started and we'll figure it out when we'll know when we're on our way. And, we had to compromise a little bit. Like sometimes we made it up as we went and sometimes we planned it out. But like you guys, I'm sure you guys went through a couple of iterations before you figured out how to set your lights and your microphones and whatever. And we see a polished version of your show, but the rules have all changed. COVID changed the rules. And now we're in this scenario where who knows where the next big thing will emerge from. But one thing's for sure, it'll only happen if you make it happen.
Yeah.
Right? Like you guys could get picked up by Netflix or, Amazon could be like, hey, we need a talk show. Who knows? These are the things that happen when you're doing, but you can't sit on the sidelines. You actually have to do, and you can't be so oversensitive that your work's not good enough.
Yeah.
Guess what? You
gotta put yourself out there.
Yeah. You gotta put yourself out there.
So I felt such a big vacuum in 2020 because a lot of my year is spent traveling around and, selling my books and meeting other people and doing, pseudo versions of your creator connection elsewhere. And it's, having that vacuum of emptiness, just like, even for me, it left me kind of at a void. And I think it was great that Keith at the perfect time was just like, hey, I want to do like this internet show featuring, independent comic creators. And like, this is kind of just what I needed to kind of fill that absence, that longing I had where I didn't feel like I was plugged in to my comic community per se.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. That same here. Like, and I put off doing this show for a while. I was thinking about doing it months ahead before we actually started it. But like you said, Buddy, it's just like you just got to jump in.
And what's the worst can happen, Keith?
Yeah, right.
Maybe the first 3 times you do it, it's a failure, and then you finally find that sort of magic thing because you didn't give up. Yeah. And I think sometimes you just have to power through the learning curve to get to where you want to be. And heck, you don't even know where you want to be sometimes. Like Erin and I, we were happy if we had 2 or 3 stories. And again, we didn't plan on making an anthology. That kind of, Johnny, that was like a thought from years ago. And then it kind of like pull an old idea, pull a new idea. We pull it together. And then this is much the community's vision, because we tried to take a very democratic approach to this. Like, what does everybody want? And we would have these meetings, like literally we voted on how the cover would look. We voted on what the title of the anthology was. This was not a top-down process. This was definitely a collaboration, and it's the voice of everybody.
Yeah. It wasn't the Buddy show.
I appreciate how gracefully it was done. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just gonna say I appreciate how gracefully it sounds like it was done, with lots of inclusion and very little elitism. And I think that's beautiful, because a lot of other anthologies I've seen have taken that approach, and they kind of leave people dejected, and they don't lift them up, or they don't, even if somebody were to submit to an anthology, like, even if you're rejected, usually there's a good, reason why, or there's, some type of creative input. And you guys were very inclusive, it sounds like, and you allowed the creators to be themselves, make their mistakes, and potentially change and grow so they can be included. And I think that's fantastic.
And John, to add to that, we were so democratic. Erin, tell them how we sorted the table of contents.
It did it alphabetically by title.
Alphabetically. We just
there you go.
That whole bit about put your best piece first, your best piece. I was like, they're all good. Like, how do we choose to just do them alphabetically?
I did find some thematic connective elements. So I'm like, I wonder if they thought about this story going next to this.
That's all in your head.
Random.
And that's the thing. Awesome. It wasn't an ego trip for any of us, because it was about our community. It was about creating.
TV series, they just weave shit together. And they're this one connects to this one. You know what I mean?
I like to think we had an ending in mind, but really, Buddy was just like, let's build this plane while it's flying, And I was like, instruction manual on how to land. Like, just for God's sakes, don't kill us.
I love it.
You know what? We needed that, because I would never take off. I would be so involved in the manual, I'd never take off. And Buddy was like, let's get this plane flying. And then we had Ari to say, this is the flight plan. And we had Arielle to say, this is how many seats we need and who we need in them, and you need,
great.
A number of different kinds of people to get that plane moving. And then we got it built and we landed it. So
I know some of you guys are old enough to understand this reference. It's like in Spinal Tap, where they have the lead singer and the lead guitarist, and the bassist is being interviewed, and we got 2 really strong personalities in this band. One of them's like fire, and one of them is like ice. And I see myself kind of in between, like tepid, lukewarm water. Whatever I hear, yeah.
It's perfect. So as we're going to start to wrap up, because we're almost at an hour and a half, which is crazy. Usually we go about an hour. But one thing, so if a creator is out there watching the show, or sees the show on our channel at some point and wants to submit something or get involved with you guys and do a story for the anthology, what's the best way for them to do that? Is that to just go to the website and join the forums and start talking, or?
So, the most straightforward way is just to send some money to Johnny C. He's handling all the cash. So in all seriousness, you go to comicbookschool.com, and we have a website. It's very easy to get to comicbookschool.com. You'll see the anthology. You pulled it up on the screen. There is a registration for a newsletter, which is free. And then there is a website that has the forums, and you'll see a link on everything's cross-linked. We are open to new registrations now. And we've been, we were locked for the whole time. One thing to note, though, Keith, is we won't take what you consider submissions. The way we want to do this is to do it as a community again. We're going to follow the process. So no stories in the can. You gotta follow the process. And one of the things that we do is we have everybody post their plot, and then everybody comments on it. Post your script and comment in the pages. And they get that feedback. So I think just sort of open your mind to a new way of working. Sign up for the newsletter, sign up for the website, and just be a doer, like participate. So, look for that, and obviously, follow all all of the fine folks who were part of the anthology. You'll see all of their emails. And one thing that we did that was really important to us was inside the anthology, we had an interstitial page, and we provided links to everybody's social handles and whatever. Go to those people, reach out to them. Maybe they'll want to partner for the next anthology, because you're not alone in this. You're going to want to build a team and build relationships. So I think that's a good first start. Go to the website, sign up for the newsletter, register for the message boards, because they will lock down after February. We don't have rolling registrations. We lock it down. So it's open now. It'll close in through February, and then we lock down and start the challenge.
And then, once this year's is in the can, would you guys do that again next year? Like January and February would be open again for the 2023 anthology? Is that how you guys kind of do it?
Personally, I like a little bit of risk and danger. So
okay.
I don't know.
Like that.
I don't know. Maybe we'll have animations in there.
Ready, shoot, aim. I love it.
Right. Let's do things. Let's challenge ourselves. And once we also have another idea that we're percolating along. We want to keep challenging ourselves. And John, you probably remember this from my panels, and Ari, you definitely remember this. And I'll just note this, because every year at New York Comic Con, I would always have a couple creators that you would see regularly, like Jerry Ordway or Sean Chen, right? You'd see the familiar face. They were the anchors. We knew what they were going to do. But I always had someone in there that I had never met before join the panels, because you have to keep an element of danger and risk and on the unknown. Like, if everything was going to run exactly the way I wanted it to run, I might not be as interested. So I would literally be shaking hands and meeting somebody going, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you." And we would meet almost literally on stage at New York Comic Con and do something. So Keith, Johnny, we're open to your ideas. We're open. Multimedia, sure. Maybe we tie a podcast into it.
Slide right into the DMs.
Join the community and come on in. We welcome all people, all ideas. Come on in. We love to hear it.
Awesome. That's great.
I'd love to have you guys just give individual plugs. Just where can people find
I was going to say, go around the room, and if you guys have something that you want to promote or plug, definitely let us know. We'll start with Buddy.
So again, guys, thank you.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. You know what? We know that your time is valuable, and you're devoting it to indie creators. So, from us to you, thank you for what you do. What you do makes it meaningful for us. You can find me at Comic Book School. I tweet about comic book schooly things, and all the handles on Twitter, Instagram, they all match, and the website's comicbookschool.com. And I hope people reach out to me. I love to hear from the community.
That's great. Arielle, anything you would like to tell us or point us to?
Well, you can find all my artwork at artsmermaid.com.
Awesome.
And my social handles are all at artsmermaid.
Okay, that's great.
Facebook is artsmermaid art, but Twitter and Instagram are all artsmermaid, and YouTube.
Awesome. And we can see some of your artwork there, and
you can find that on my website and on my Instagram.
Perfect. Awesome. AA, double awesome Ari.
You can contact me at the Surreal Ari, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. They're all the same. It's at the Surreal Ari. You can also reach me on my website, aarubin.wordpress.com. And I will occasionally show up on Johnny C's movie preview show as well. I wore his T-shirt today. I knew I was going to be on his show.
Oh, awesome.
I knew I was going to be on the show. I'm still waiting for mine. I will occasionally show up there as well.
Awesome.
How about you, Erin?
So I'm the Red-Headed Ed on Twitter and Gmail, any YouTube stuff. Just make sure it's a double ED. I don't want to send you to any porn sites you're not ready for at work. It's Red-Headed Ed. Usually for comic book stuff, I'm on Facebook or Twitter. I do have an Instagram account, but it's complicated because Red-Headed Ed was taken. So it's Red-Headed Ed where all the E's are 3s. But you can link to it on my website, redheadeded.com, which should be up now. was having a URL issue yesterday, but it should be right. And just reach out to me on Facebook or, Twitter. I'm around.
Awesome.
Also,
Great.
the Comic Book School forums.
Oh, and I see something here too. Let me share this with the audience from the private chat here. This is a link Buddy shared. You said, what is this, Buddy? It's like a voting thing? Let me see.
Yeah, we aspire to be award-winning comic book creators. And this is, so if anybody has any awards that they don't need, we want them. Doesn't matter what they are, bowling awards, we don't care. But we want to win some awards, and this is a way for us to win an award. And
Awesome.
Yeah, and there's a cash prize. So there's about 25 of us.
Yeah, Johnny, you're gonna have to cash that in for us and divvy it up.
It's actually a briefcase full of that coffee that Johnny said.
Yeah.
Wait, Johnny, you got coffee and a movie show and T-shirts. Are you holding out on us?
I have a coffee lemon tied to my comic book, Buddy. I don't know if I ever told you about that.
Yeah, Johnny, throw it a plug while you're here.
Really.
By Death. You can find it on Global Comics. You can find it on Facebook. You can find it on Comixology. Basically, it's Walking Dead meets Mallrats. And the first
you put a link. Would you be able to put a link in the?
Oh yeah, we could put a link straight up in the comments over there.
Yeah, you got Johnny. Link me so I'll throw it in the comments. I'll also put it in the description of the video as well. So if anybody's watching this and wants to check these guys out, it'll be in the description of the video. And then also I wanted to share some exciting news too. I have a 5-page story in. Are you guys familiar with Don Chen at all? He's a creator. He created a comic book in the 80s called. It was like a parody of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. It was called The Adolescent Black Belt Radioactive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're familiar with
that? Yeah, I got that.
He's coming back out of retirement after like 20 years, and he did a comic book called X-FARCE, making fun of Rob Liefeld's X-Force, and he asked me and my art team to be part of it. So I got a 5-page story in that, making fun of X-Men, basically. Oh, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Don checked in earlier on the chat, too. He was watching earlier.
Yeah, I saw that, and he's going to be our guest on our next live stream as well.
Yeah, the next episode's Don.
Yeah, so check that out. That's on Indiegogo if you guys are looking for something making fun of the X-Men, basically.
And I just wanted to say for one other thing is to check out Creator Aftercon Network. It was founded by J. Jacob Barker, Stan Cho, and Steve Petrovelli, but myself, Jeff Ryder, and a bunch of other creators have kept it alive. And it was born out of Buddy's Creator Connection. And we have our annual party at the Twins when Corona's not happening.
Yeah, so, I have to go to one of these. You know what happens, Buddy? I tell Johnny invites me to all these things, but it's like after I do a whole day of a convention, the only thing I want to go to is my bed. So.
Okay, to be fair, I thought the same thing, and Buddy said, "No, go." And I went, and I met Johnny, and I met Ari, and I met
gotta go.
And I met all of these people, and I'll be honest, I bowed out early. I did, but I walked around with one beer. That's all I could stand after the whole con. Like normally I'd be 3 in, but it was like just meeting people. Like you just keep meeting people. And then all of the people that I've been in touch with this past year, I met there, everybody. So
all right, you guys convinced
totally
me.
do
I'll
it.
have to go to the next one. Okay.
Join us.
It's all about the network, Keith. It's all about the network.
It really
awesome.
is. Thank you guys so much for taking the time.
Thank you guys for joining us tonight.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your creativity with us. I hope everybody watching and took the time to watch really check everybody out. Check out these creators, and if you're aspiring creator yourself, I think there's something that you can take away from comic book school. So definitely take the time to check that out. And thank you all for watching once again.
Yeah. And thank you guys. Check out all 4 of these guys on that anthology, which you can get free. Check in the description. There's links for everything. And then, if you're a creator, also reach out to them. And thanks, guys, for joining us. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Don Chen. and I'll have another comic review up next week. All right. Good night.